Advent means the arrival. The season of Advent is about holding space for the longing and anticipation of the Israelites as they waited for God to act. As they waited for the Messiah to come and restore things to the way they should be, waiting for God to bring an end to their suffering, isolation, and oppression.
I think it will be much easier for us to enter the spirit of Advent this year. For we too find ourselves waiting, longing, hoping, and anticipating the end of our suffering and isolation. We too are waiting for life to be restored to the way we think it should be.
Today, the whole world is anxiously awaiting the arrival of the end of this pandemic, awaiting the advent of a solution, a vaccine, herd immunity, something, anything to make this waiting stop. We don't like to wait, do we?
This waiting, this longing, this anticipation is not a bad thing. It is an opportunity. This Advent, we are invited to lean into the waiting. Lean in and experience fully the longing, the anticipation, the unending wondering in our hearts. How long, O Lord? How long?
So let us wait upon the Lord. Let us feel the longing in our hearts. Let us sense God's presence in our waiting.
Advent reminds us to focus our longing on the deeper things of life. Advent reminds us that what our souls truly long for is the arrival of Emmanuel, God with us, and the hope, peace, love, and joy that God's presence brings.
During the next song, you are invited to ponder 3 questions. What is God trying to reveal to us through this season of waiting? Where is God in the midst of our waiting? Finally, what is it we are anticipating? What is it exactly we are wanting to arrive?
How long, O Lord, will you forget us forever? How long will you hide your face from us? How long must we have sorrow in our hearts? How long shall our enemy be exalted over us? Consider and answer us, O Lord God. Lift up our eyes, lest we sleep the sleep of death, lest our enemies say, I have prevailed over them. Restore us, O God. Make your face shine upon us, that we may be saved. This Sunday, our Advent focus is on hope. But what is hope? We may all ask. Hope is not wishing or even believing things will get better. Hope is what enables us to accept that things may stay the same or actually even get worse. Yet, we can still trust God. We trust God will fulfill God's promises in the appointed time. It's not a matter of if, but when. Hope is the confidence that no matter how things unfold, there is a meaning underneath it all. That's probably the hardest part to actually believe and let it sink in and embrace. Even if we don't see or understand it in our lifetime, hope is trusting we'll understand it all by and by. Here's an Advent affirmation of hope for all of us. I am confident there is a deeper meaning underlying everything that happens in my life. I trust God. During the next song, I will invite you to reflect on this Advent affirmation of hope. I am confident there is a deeper meaning underlying everything that happens in life. I trust God.
Let's talk about trees, shall we? Matthew chapter 7. These are the words of Jesus. He says, "Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? No, of course not. Every good tree bears good fruit, and every bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. And so it is, by their fruit, you recognize what kind of person someone is." Well, I spent a few weeks with this passage, and I just want to share two things that came to me. The first thing I noticed was Jesus says trees that do not bear good fruit are cut down and thrown into the fire. Jesus is talking about divine judgment there. And this is actually a pretty common theme in Jesus' teachings, probably more common than we would like. And what Jesus is saying here is divine judgment, whatever that looks like, is not based on your beliefs, but it's based on the fruit that you produce with your life. And we see this again and again in Jesus' teachings. In fact, in the very next verse, verse 21, Jesus says, "Not everyone who calls me Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father." Jesus doesn't say, only those who believe in me. No, only those who do the will of God will enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus continues, "Many will say to me on the day of judgment, 'Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? Did we not do miracles in your name?' But I will tell them directly, 'I never knew you. Away from me, you evil doers.'" On the judgment day, whenever that is, Jesus won't say, "Away from me, you non-believers." Jesus says, "Away from me, you evil doers." We will be judged based on our doing, by our fruit, not by our beliefs. Now, the most famous example of this is probably Matthew 25, the parable of the sheep and the goats. Another parable where Jesus is talking about divine judgment. And on that day of divine judgment, Jesus will not inquire about your understanding of the atonement theory or your theology of peace. Jesus will inquire, what did you do for others? Did you feed the hungry? Did you care for those who were oppressed and held captive? Did you share your possessions with those who are in need? Did you offer shelter to the homeless and refugees? This is what Jesus is interested in on the day of divine judgment. Now, another thing that has always struck me about this story, the parable of the sheep and the goats, is that both the sheep and the goats are surprised that they're sheep and goats. The sheep are surprised that they are the righteous ones. They are surprised that they are serving Jesus. They're like, "What? We didn't know we were serving you, Jesus. That's interesting." And the goats, they're surprised they're goats. They thought they were the righteous. They thought they were serving Jesus. Whoa, wait a second. When did we neglect to serve you, Jesus? I find that very interesting. And really, there's so many teachings of Jesus that, seriously, the idea that our beliefs are more important than what we do, it's just not consistent with Jesus' teachings if you actually read the Gospels. How you live, what you do, what you say. Remember, Jesus on another occasion says, "You will be judged by every word that comes out of your mouth." The fruit that our life produces, that is how we will be judged. Now, some of you are maybe thinking, wait a second, is Troy preaching a works-based salvation? Troy, are you saying that if our good deeds outweigh our bad deeds, then we get into heaven? Well, first of all, I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling you what Jesus said. That's all. If you have an issue, take it up with Jesus. Second of all, if you're asking me to explain how God's judgment works, I can't. And I think anyone who pretends that they do understand how God's judgment works, I think that demonstrates a staggering lack of humility on their part, to be perfectly frank. We don't understand so many things. And I think a big problem with Christianity is when we try to explain things that we don't understand, like God's judgment and how it works. There is so much mystery in life and in our faith, and we have to accept that mystery. How God's judgment works and will work is above my pay grade, and it's above your pay grade. We're on a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know how judgment works. Go back to verse 1 of this chapter, Matthew 7, and how does Jesus start this part of his sermon? Do not judge. That's not your job. That's not your job. Your job, Jesus goes on to continue through Matthew 7, is to pay attention to the fruit you are producing in your life. That's your number one job. That's where 99% of your energy needs to be in your faith journey. Focusing on your life, recognizing the beam in your own eye, the big pile of sawdust that you need to work on in your own life. And Jesus gives us a hint here. Examine yourself. Are you ignoring the poor? You need to work on that. Are you forgiving people who have wronged you? No, you need to work on that. Are you being generous and sharing with others? No, you need to work on that. Your growth is your job. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part is this. The second thing that jumped out to me. Jesus says a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. A good tree only produces good fruit, and a bad tree only produces bad fruit. At first, I just read over that. I'm like, yeah, of course, I think I know what Jesus is saying. And then I spent some time just really kind of steeping in this. And then I realized, wait a second. Do I only produce good fruit in my life? No. I mean, I produce some good fruit, and I produce some not so good fruit in my life. Wait a second, is Jesus saying that makes me a bad tree? Because good trees only produce good fruit. A good tree cannot produce unhealthy, toxic, destructive fruit. And then I started thinking about everyone else. Wait a second, who on earth only bears good fruit in their lives? And the answer is nobody. Nobody only produces good fruit. And the opposite is true as well. I don't know anyone, and I know a few scoundrels, I don't know anyone who only produces bad fruit. Do you? So I spent some time thinking about this. According to Jesus' logic, none of us are good trees or bad trees. So what is Jesus saying here? This doesn't make sense. As I spent time with it, the story of the two wolves came to my mind. Are you familiar with this story? I'll tell it to you. A grandfather was telling his grandson a story about two wolves. He said, "Grandson, inside you, inside every human being, are two wolves, and they are fighting for control." Well, the grandson got a concerned look on his face. And he asked his grandfather, "Okay, so which wolf wins?" The grandfather says, "The wolf you feed. Whichever wolf you feed will get stronger, and it will win the battle for control in your life." As I thought about that, I wondered, is that what Jesus is saying here? There are two trees inside each of us. There's a good tree of life, and there's a bad tree of death and destruction. And whichever tree that you feed and water and nurture and fertilize, that tree will get stronger and produce more and more fruit. The real challenge Jesus is giving us is, which tree are you fertilizing and nurturing and tending to in your life? Because the good tree in you, the tree of spirit, the tree of life, it only produces good fruit. So you can tell when you are tending to and nourishing the good tree, because the fruit you're producing is good, it's healthy, it's life-giving. I think the majority of Jesus' teachings are helping us figure out how to water and feed and nurture and fertilize this good tree within us. Jesus is saying, when you withhold judgment, when you refrain from judging another human being, you are fertilizing that good tree of spirit and life within you, and it's getting stronger. When you decide to forgive someone who has wronged you, you are watering and nourishing that tree of life inside you, making it stronger. When you decide to be generous and share your possessions, your resources with other people in need, you are nurturing that good tree of life and spirit within you, and it's going to get stronger, and it's going to produce more and more fruit. And of course, the opposite is true. Every time you judge another human being, you are fertilizing that tree of death and destruction in your heart, and it's going to get stronger. Every time you refuse to forgive and hold a grudge against someone, you are nurturing and empowering that bad tree of death. Every decision we make, every thought, every word, every deed is either fertilizing the tree of life within us or fertilizing the tree of death. It all matters. Every little decision matters. There are two wolves within us. There are two trees. Which defines your character? Which one determines who you will become?
Go say good morning, but I guess it's good afternoon. So thank you, Troy, for the message. That was very, very encouraging. And the one thing that really struck me, and I think it's fitting with what I want to share this morning, just a bit of a financial update, is the generosity piece that Troy shared with us, that I think there is a blessing to giving, not only for yourself, but for others. And that's that watering that tree and the good gifts that come as a result of it. So I do encourage you to be generous, and I'm going to share with you an opportunity. This is just one opportunity you have to be generous, but share a little bit about where we're at with the church finances. So last year-to-date givings, to give you a little bit of perspective, we were at $163,000. The budget this year is $187,000, and currently we're at $141,000. So we are slipping a little bit, still doing fairly well, though. The bottom line, overall, we have a deficit year-to-date. This is to the end of October, so I know there have been some offerings yet in November that are not reflected yet in these numbers, but the overall deficit at the end of October was $3,630. So we had a bit of a surplus in the sharing fund and the capital fund, so our operating deficit currently is just over $7,000. So I also want to give you a little update on our conversations that we're having with Greenwood on the building. So as of November the 1st, we're no longer paying rent there. They've been using our facilities. So they agreed that they would stop charging us our share of the costs. So that's a blessing. On the other hand, we're now spending, it's $300 a week to be in this building. So if we're here for a full month, those two work out pretty closely. I think we're a little over $1,300 a month, plus a few additional costs. But our base payment every month at Greenwood was $1,350. So the other is Greg's been working hard to pull things together, and we do have an appraisal now that was done last week, Greg. And so we've had our conversations. We've shared it with Greenwood. We are hoping to have a meeting, hopefully this coming week. We've put it back to them. And so we should be able to give you an update shortly as to, I'm hoping we can get to a number that we'll be able to share with you within maybe the next week or so. So you can keep those conversations in your prayers. That would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tim. I also want to thank you, Charmaine. I want to thank Dante and Nathan and Cyril. Thank you, Elias, for running the camera. Thank you, Tina, wherever you are, and Bill for helping us all get in here today. Thanks, Charlie, for running the sound system. Really appreciate that. And thanks to you as well, Troy. I'm going to close with this scripture from Isaiah 9. It'll be very familiar. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You've enlarged the nation. You've increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. Here comes the good part. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. It is this peace that I wish you, as I say, go in peace. See you next time.